Good evening, everybody. I'm Jessica Barajas, Research and Policy Associate at the Learning Policy Institute. Welcome to tonight's learning session, Shared Leadership and Power for School Transformation, Part 2, Developing Shared Decision-Making Teams. Research shows that district and school level change is more effective and sustainable when it is owned and supported by all the stakeholders that are impacted. So we are really looking forward to unpacking this important topic tonight. This session is part of a learning series focused on creating racially just and relationship-centered community schools. Through these sessions, we tap the wisdom and experience of a broad cross-section of experts, from students and families, organizers, school staff, to researchers. So who is with us tonight? We have over 200 participants that registered from all over California, representing students, families, organizers, community partners, advocates, researchers, district and school staff, state leaders, and funders from the organizations and districts that you see here today. Thank you all for being here. This session was developed in collaboration with the California Partnership for the Future of Learning. And I now want to invite Terry Supahan to do some grounding for us and share about who the California Partnership is. Terry is the Executive Director of True North Organizing Network. True North is part of PICO, California Education for Liberation, and anchor member of the California Partnership. Terry.
Thank you, Jessica. Before we get started, I wanted to tell a story about land acknowledgement. Last year, I was invited to become a global landscape steward, and the network invited me to go to Australia in October. And I was really amazed to find out that from the very first plane ride in Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Brisbane, Australia, and then all the other trips and meetings, not just on the airplanes, but in every single official formal meeting that we were in, it always started with a federal acknowledgement from the federal government about the Aboriginal and Indigenous people on the land that we were speaking and talking and building relationship in. And as important as that was, and that over 20 years ago, there were 300 Aboriginal and tribal and Indigenous groups that met in Australia with the federal government to make that happen. I just think the acknowledgements are an opportunity for all of us to think about the land, the people of the land that we're on now, and what it could have been if all of us were here to do a better job of making sure that Indigenous voices and tribal people were a part of the shared decision-making that we want community schools to be a part of. My heart really starts to run and jump when I think, what could it have been like if Indian people weren't run over, but were lifted up, and just like we're doing in this meeting today, wanting to reach out to everyone. So that's my land acknowledgement. It's just a little bit about not only the history, but our future. Now I'd like to provide a credential for the California Partnership for Future Learning. This partnership is led by Catalyst California, Californians for Justice, PICO California, and Public Advocates, with the support of Building Healthy Communities Monterey, Community Coalition, Inner City Struggle, and over a dozen other grassroots organizations, as well as research and foundation partners like the Learning Policy Institute. I also want to take a moment to say that I am going to try to consciously speak slower than I normally do. I probably already speak slow, but I want to go slower for the interpreters. So if you need me to go slower, just holler at me. I'm very responsive to you letting me know what's going on. So I'm going to try to speak slower. In 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic began, schools across the state closed down. Our partnership responded by having conversations with over 600 students and families of color across the state to understand needs and priorities. Key issues that emerged were the need for mental health support, students feeling they lacked a sense of belonging and relationship, a need for access to, a need for access to equitable learning opportunities, and the importance of engaging students and families as decision-making partners. As a result, we began focusing our advocacy on increased funding for transformative, racially just, relationship-centered community schools. We met with policymakers and spoke at hearings, and between 2020 and 2022, we advocated and saw investments of over $4.1 billion for community schools. That is out of sight. I was at the National Rural Summit as a presenter and speaker 2 weeks ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they were talking about it back east, about what California had done. So we should all be proud of that. We are now supporting the uptake and implementation of the program in districts and schools across the state. We've seen strong uptake by local education agencies, districts, county offices of education, and charter schools across 2 rounds of planning grants and 1 round of implementation grants. You can see the numbers here. Demand exceeded supply for the first round of implementation, with more districts requesting funding than was available. What is the partnership's vision for transformative community schools? Transformative community schools is not a program, it's an approach to how we do school in California. Transformative community schools start with building trusting relationships and teams grounded in shared power and mutual respect and accountability. Our collective efforts have been focused on ensuring that Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and other directly impacted students, along with their families, community partners, and educators, are directly engaged in developing the Community Schools Partnership Program at every single level. For example, in the winter of 2021, we organized with the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color to engage students, families, educators, community organizers, and advocates during 6 CDE-hosted regional community schools forum. Over 600 people made their voices heard in multiple languages to impact the California Community Schools framework. We are continuing to organize and advocate for strong implementation of racially just community schools. As mentioned, together with the Learning Policy Institute, today's learning session has been developed collaboratively through a California Partnership Working Group. And I just want to stress that about the importance of shared decision-making. When we do that, it reminds me of a village. And if you want continuance of your village and to be able to dance with your ancestors and to imagine a better place for future ancestors, then you have to create a safe space for future leaders and to share important decision-making. You have to intentionally do it so it can get done. Thanks so much for being here tonight. It's all you, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, for that beautiful grounding. I love the image of the village dancing. Now, as we get ready for our panel discussion, I want to introduce to you Justine Santos, Senior Strategy Director at Californians for Justice, an anchor member of the California Partnership. And Justine will be moderating our panel tonight. Justine.
Thanks, Jessica, and good evening, everyone. I am really excited to be here with you all today and moderating this wonderful panel. Through my own organizing in Oakland for shared power in schools with students, families, educators, and community over the years, I've definitely deeply learned and understand that shared decision-making in schools not only creates greater capacity for transformation, but also creates long-lasting, sustainable transformation. So for this very reason, I am so excited to introduce this amazing panel representing Buena Vista Horace Mann, a K-8 community school in San Francisco Unified School District, who will be sharing with us about the rich practices that they have established to authentically engage students, families, and community partners. So first up, we have Annabelle Ibanez, Family Resource Specialist who has been a part of Buena Vista Horace Mann community for more than 5 years. Next, joining us, we have Claudia de la Rios Moran, Principal of Buena Vista Horace Mann, who has been an administrator there for 7 years. We also have with us Katia Aguillon Garcia, 6th grade student at Buena Vista Horace Mann and an active member in student government. Next, we have Luz Rodriguez, Parent English Learner Advisory Committee President and past President of the PTA. And also joining us tonight is Nick Chandler, who has been the Community Schools Coordinator at Buena Vista Horace Mann for 10 years. As you have questions throughout our panel, please put these in the chat and we will try to get to them as many as possible during the Q&A portion after our panel discussion. But I'm gonna go ahead and get our discussion started. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with you, Annabelle. If you can just share with us some context about Buena Vista Horace Mann and what does being a community school mean at Buena Vista Horace Mann?
Thank you so much, Justine. And once again, my name is Annabelle Ibanez, and I'm the Family Resource Specialist at Buena Vista Horace Mann School. Let me first start by saying that Buena Vista Horace Mann School, K-8, Spanish Immersion School, is located in the heart of the Mission District in San Francisco, serving a large number of Latino and immigrant student body with a high percentage of students that qualify for free reduced lunch program. 12 years ago, the district merged 2 schools together to create La Escuela Comunitaria Buena Vista Horace Mann, or better known as BVHM. At that time, you couldn't have merged 2 very different schools serving similar demographics that we continue to provide services today. When the 2 schools came together, the community wanted to make the new school a community school. When it started, it didn't have all the pillars of a community school, but there was a foundation of wanting to be a community school. And it's been almost 12 years that the school has been working to be a community school. As we look at the community school models or the pillars of what is a community school, this is how BVHM incorporates them. First, we have a strong connection with our community in the teaching and learning. For example, for middle school, we provide a seminar, which is an extra elective course that students can choose from. Through this process, they select a class of their interest, whether it's chess, capoeira, dance, creative writing, weight training, or student government, and other activities that we provide for them. Second, we have expanded the learning time and through before and after school and the summer programs, which run as a beacon program with Jamestown Community Center, along with linked day staff that pushes into the school day classes to provide academic and social emotional support. And they also provide with the social emotional learning and behavioral support. We also have integrated the student support like mental health support on the site, food bank. We have a stable over program which provides housing to all families that need a place to stay. Lastly, we have a strong family and community engagement and shared decision making process, which you will be hearing more in our with our panelists presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Annabelle, for all that rich content about Buena Vista Horace Mann and you all's definition of community school. And so in a bit, we will hear about how Buena Vista Horace Mann approaches shared decision making. But before that, I want to invite Nick to share with us about why you developed this approach to shared decision making. What needs were you trying to solve for?
Yeah, hi everybody. This was a process that started with student behavior. And I think that is really important to highlight. This whole journey into shared decision-making started with us trying to understand the meaning behind our students' behavior. We were faced with really intense, kind of concentrated behaviors from a group of students. And as we started to get information about them, work with their family, understand what that behavior meant, we surfaced a through line, and that through line was housing. And so knowing what we know about community schools and hopes and needs assessments and the role that plays, we dug deep into that question and we did a housing needs assessment to try to understand what are our families facing when it comes to housing. This is not isolated. This is deeper than just one student and their behavior. And we surfaced a need in San Francisco in the Mission District. You can imagine a need that was impacting their access to education on a daily basis. So to address that need was a long process, and to understand that need was a long process. And we went through that. It became clear that we had an option available to us, but that was not a decision that could be made by one principal or one parent or one superintendent. And the solution we had in front of us was that we needed to use the space that we had to provide emergency shelter for our families. And that sparked the need for a different kind of decision-making than we were used to. It meant that we needed to take this idea to our families, to our staff, to our neighbors in the neighborhood, and really think through what could this do for our students and families? How could this change their access to education? How can we think through this problem together and come to a consensus and make a decision about something really critical to the students and families that we're here to serve? And I think that divisive conversation brought out some things about our community and some things about the institution of schools that we get used to, that we get accustomed to. Who has a voice in a school community? Who has control over how funding is applied? Who has a sense of what's the most equitable use of our time and energy? And this divisive conversation about opening up our school in a way that had never been done before in the country, it brought that out, and it gave us an incentive to really listen to folks and bring folks out and write everything down and make it transparent and make sure that when we made a decision, we had the support of our whole community, not just the folks that typically tend to have that power and have that privilege. And that, in my opinion, that is what flipped the dynamics at our school, that made us now accountable to students and families in a different way. And I think once we hit that point in our organizational culture by addressing this challenge, we haven't gone back. In that moment where we decided that this is not about what I think is best or about what the principal thinks best or the PTA president, but what is the most impactful thing we can do right now for our families, it revealed, at least to me, the power that shared decision-making has, and the almost comfort that you can have moving forward, doing uncomfortable things, knowing you have the support, and that it's not just you that's responsible. This is community input and community accountability.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nick. That was super powerful. And with that context and background, I do want to move us to you, Claudia, as the school leader. What are some foundational elements that make Buena Vista Horace Mann's shared decision-making process authentic and genuine in the way that you are engaging students, families, and the community?
Well, good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you all tonight. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about our shared leadership approach. I really want to emphasize that our shared leadership approach is, as Nick said, is not up to me as the principal, right? Like as a school, we committed early on to a vision that was inclusive and that was rooted in social justice. And if you have a vision rooted in social justice that really focuses on including everyone, that means that everybody gets a say. Everyone is included in what happens at the school. Everyone gets to share what is important for them. And so we have to uphold processes that ensure that we are collecting everybody's ideas and that really reflect back what the values are of our community. One of the ways that we've been able to do that is craft a vision that guides us through all of our decisions. So this vision is something that you will find at the bottom of all of our meeting agendas. We often actually speak the vision out loud when we start or end our school governance meetings. It's one that was crafted by our staff and then edited by all of our governance bodies, including the School Site Council, the PTA, and the ELAC. And it's something that we measure our work up against. Is what we're focusing on really in line with our vision? Is what we're doing right now with our time helping us to realize our vision? And so if I may, I'd like to read to you our vision. It's not excessively long, but it's long enough to really capture what we're trying to do as a community. So Buena Vista Horace Mann is a K-8 dual language Spanish immersion school in the heart of the historic Mission District of San Francisco. Celebrating a variety of identities at BVHM, educators guide students to become strong bilingual, multicultural agents of change. Through academically rigorous instruction, technology, and the arts, educators develop students' collaborative and critical thinking skills, preparing them for a dynamic world. Inspired by the core values of our community and supported by an equity-focused and culturally relevant social-emotional curriculum, our students rise to our high expectations and bloom into healthy, competent, and confident learners. Finally, our visionary social justice lens allows students and their families to analyze the current social reality, the result of injustices and resistance, empowering them to transform our community for the betterment of all. And it's important and on purpose that we mention that we have a strong social justice lens. By doing so, we are able to relentlessly focus on equity without apology. And what that means to us is checking in with the needs of the most vulnerable students and their families, and giving our attention to those needs, removing whatever barriers are coming up to their learning, so that we can really fully trust that given the appropriate education inside of the classroom, our students will be able to access it because we are supporting their parents. We are, in all of the ways that they need support, so the students don't have to worry about anything other than being happy and joyful. So I would say that the reason we are able to hold a strong shared leadership approach is really because we're rooted in a strong vision. We're rooted in a social justice lens that explicitly calls for equity. And what else we know about social justice is it's all about self-determination, right? It's all about having your voice heard. And so when we say in our vision that we want our students to be multicultural agents of change, it's because we know that they deserve a better world. And they are the only ones that are going to be able to get themselves there. So our job is to make sure that they are adequately informed and educated so they can do whatever they want with their lives. The other thing that I want to mention that's at the center of our work, I think, as a social justice school, are the values of organizing and the values of coalition building. And you can't get there if you are not sharing leadership. I'm not the king of the school. I don't command anybody to do anything. I'm checking in with the people that I work with and helping them realize their vision in concert with everybody else's vision. So I'm much more like a conductor. And that is fundamentally a approach that comes out of restorative practices, which again, make sure that everybody's voices are in the room, everyone's values and needs are centered, and we're setting up a space where we can all hear each other, even across difference.
Thank you so much, Claudia. It's definitely resonating the foundation that you all are setting around being so values forward. And I'm going to stay with you for another question. And I just want to dive into Buena Vista Horace Mann's shared decision-making structures a little bit more. And if you can just tell us a little bit, if you can tell us more about the various decision-making bodies that contribute to shared decision-making at the school, and what does the collaboration across different groups and teams look like?
Okay, so we have a parent-teacher association. We have an ELAC, which is specifically for parents of English learners. We have a school site council. So those are all of those bodies have representation from families and school staff, where we are talking about different issues in our school community, right? For the ELAC group, it's really centered on the needs of English learners. For the PTA, our hope is that we can move more away from fundraising and really focus on community building. We're getting there. And the school site council, and Katia and Annabelle will be able to talk more about this, is really the place where we bring school-wide issues and information and think about them from all different angles, from angles of every different stakeholder in the room. It's where we create surveys, but also analyze the data that we're receiving from those surveys. It's where we're looking at our academic results from both standardized tests and also just information that we're hearing from the students and the the teachers as well as the families about how things are going in the classroom. It's where we make decisions about where we want to go as a community in terms of big initiatives. So those are the decision-making structures that meet on a regular basis. There's also a very important school governance body called the UBC, which is where the staff meets together as a union, and they discuss issues that are coming up that are certainly important for them, both within the school as well as at the community at large. And so all of those governance bodies meet on a monthly basis, but very importantly, they also meet with myself and with our leadership team in the interim so that we can co-create agendas together and really make sure that we're on the same page about what we're working towards. So I don't just go to those meetings, I meet with people in the interim to make sure I'm aware of the issues and you know, nobody's ambushing anybody else when we all sit down for the formal meetings. There are lots of other meetings that happen in the interim, but those I would say are the ones that are open to everybody, and we really encourage participation.
Thanks, Claudia. And I think that's really powerful that you are so present in all of those meetings. And you mentioned some two critical decision teams, which is the PTA and the ELAC, and we have Luz here, who I know represents that very critical space. So I'm going to turn it to you, Luz. We would love to hear from you. What has been your experience as a parent leader serving as the president of the ELAC and formerly the co-president of the PTA?
Gracias, hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Luz Rodríguez y soy un padre en la escuela de Buena Vista. Entonces, tengo 3 hijos. Uno está en la escuela Lincoln, que es en high school. Tengo 2 hijos que están en la escuela Buena Vista, Horace Mann. Entonces, pues desde el comienzo he sido una madre muy activa, tanto como en la educación de mis hijos, sobre todo en el aprendizaje y aprendiendo, ¿verdad? Que si quiero que hayan cambios, tengo que ser parte de ellos. Para llegar a una transformación justa, ¿verdad? Tenemos que empezar por el liderazgo. He sido copresidenta de la organización PTA y por los últimos años he sido la presidenta del ELAC en mi escuela. Esto me ha ayudado a saber cómo lidiar y trabajar con diferentes padres que no tienen estudiantes aprendices de inglés, con los maestros y la administración de nuestra escuela y la comunidad para implementar estrategias que benefician a todos. Y lo más importante es que satisfacemos las necesidades de todos nuestros estudiantes y aprendices de inglés a nivel estudiantil. Una de las cosas que hacemos en ELAC es que nos reunimos una vez al mes para discutir qué son las necesidades de nuestros estudiantes, aprendices de inglés, y sobre las estrategias que les pueden ayudar a alcanzar las metas educativas de nuestros estudiantes. Por ejemplo, si hay algunos estudiantes que no se han reclasificado, los padres junto a la administración y maestros, líderes, hacemos una lluvia de ideas. Después decidimos cuáles de estas ideas son las más estratégicas para ayudar a los estudiantes, aprendices de inglés, y trabajamos juntos con la administración y maestros del concilio escolar. Esto para que esto sea parte del plan educativo de la escuela. Y así, de esta manera, apoyamos y fortalecemos las áreas en las que se necesita trabajar y llegar a la meta. Esto nos ayuda a crear relaciones de confianza y estar en el mismo nivel. Al final se implementan las ideas y como padres participamos ya sea en talleres para aprender qué es la educación especial, cómo se clasifican los alumnos, cómo se reclasifican, perdón, o qué otras ayudas necesitan los estudiantes. Por ejemplo, recientemente tuvimos un taller que fue dirigido por un padre de ELAC. En ese taller pudimos y aprendimos nuevas estrategias de cómo abogar por nuestros hijos de educación especial, que es muy importante. Fue fue específicamente sobre el autismo, ya que vemos que hay muchas necesidades con estos estudiantes, ¿verdad? Y saber apoyarlos. Y de esta manera podemos crear esta conexión. También hemos tenido una feria de servicios comunitarios, quienes trabajan muy de cerca en los temas de importancia a la comunidad latina aquí en San Francisco, que es muy, muy importante tener muchas oportunidades para nuestra comunidad latina y tener los recursos necesarios. Así que de esta manera he sido parte líder aquí de ILAC y cómo he trabajado y cómo ha transcurrido este tiempo y cómo poder ser líder. Así que es muy, muy importante participar como padres y ser parte de estos toma de decisiones para un mejor futuro y una mejor educación en las escuelas.
Thank you so much, Luz, for sharing your expertise. I do have a follow-up question for you. You were kind of starting to talk about how you involve other parents, but what makes it possible for parents like yourself to be involved in the school's decision-making process?
Claro que sí. Entonces voy a compartir un poco de mi experiencia como líder de ILAC y otras prácticas sobre el proceso de las decisiones en la escuela. Una de las cosas en las que el diseño de la agenda vive dentro del propio grupo. Por ejemplo, Miss Claudia diseña las agendas del SSI, del concilio escolar, con la presidenta del SSI, que es un padre líder, al igual que yo. ILAC hace su propia agenda. Los dos grupos consultan con Miss Claudia mensualmente basado en el contenido de la agenda. Los padres deciden ellos deciden lo que tienen que estar en la agenda de la siguiente manera. En nuestra escuela, ILAC ocupa el lugar de organizar e informar a los padres. ILAC también ayuda a los padres para que participen en el avance educativo de sus hijos. Por ejemplo, ¿cómo se reclasifican los estudiantes aprendices de inglés? ¿Cuál es el proceso de la educación especial? ¿Cómo apoyar el aprendizaje de esos estudiantes en general? También los padres son los que deciden los temas que ellos quieren discutir y aprender durante el año escolar. Ellos hacen recomendaciones para el concilio escolar dentro del proceso de las reuniones de ILAC. También en este proceso ayudamos en el desarrollo del liderazgo de las familias, que es muy importante. Los padres empiezan a tomar su liderazgo ayudando en el alcance a otros padres en la participación de la escuela. Esto es basado a través de las varias estructuras de liderazgo que apoyan la participación familiar, como por ejemplo, las estructuras y contenido son diferentes para todas las reuniones. Diferenciamos el contenido sobre lo que se va a votar para que todos comprendan las decisiones que van a tomar. Otro ejemplo es dentro del personal del centro de bienestar, quienes participaron en una reunión para compartir sobre los apoyos estudiantiles del aprendizaje social y emocional. Tenemos protocolos que permiten tiempos para una conversación genuina. Por ejemplo, damos tiempo para tener conversaciones en grupos pequeños, porque no todo el mundo se siente cómodo en un grupo grande. Participamos en turnos y conversaciones y hay discusiones entre pares para ayudar a que el contenido de una reunión sea más accesible. En nuestras reuniones articulamos las normas para que haya una voz de equidad y tener participación sincera dentro de las normas. También tenemos horarios flexibles y reuniones híbridas e interpretación. Es muy importante para que todos entiendan de lo que estamos hablando, ¿verdad? Para que todos comprendan qué es lo que significa lo que estamos compartiendo y la información. Para la interpretación tenemos que ser pacientes y prepararnos para ello. hay veces que tenemos que hacerlo en el momento si es necesario. Y lo más importante es no avanzar en la reunión si no tenemos interpretación. De esa manera nuestras familias tienen la oportunidad de entender lo que se trata. Anteriormente el distrito solía hacer solo interpretación en las reuniones del SSI, pero ahora también dan servicios para las reuniones del PTA para reducir la barrera para los hablantes monolingües en español. También alternamos el idioma en el que se hacen las reuniones, o sea, una vez en español y una vez en inglés. Eso es muy, muy importante. En términos de liderazgo, nosotros no solo hablamos con las personas que están listas para participar, pero también tenemos conversaciones uno a uno, que es bien importante, ¿verdad? Hablar con las familias y expresarles lo que significa, ¿verdad?, ser un padre líder y que su voz tiene mucho poder. ¿Ok? Así que eso es bien, bien importante que las familias sepan que nuestra voz es poder y que todos en conjunto podemos tener muchos cambios, ¿verdad? Pero si no lo hacemos en equipo, no vamos a tener, ¿verdad? No vamos a tener estos cambios. Así que tenemos que luchar en conjunto para tener cambios y que todas nuestras escuelas, ¿verdad?, estén bien, bien fortalecidas para ofrecer una mejor educación para nuestros hijos, que eso es lo más importante. Así que escuelas comunitarias arriba, sí se puede. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Luz. That was really rich and such a powerful example that you offered. And thanks for lifting an example on school site council. And I actually want to move us forward in going a little deeper and learning more about school site council at the school. So I'm going to turn to you, Claudia. Can you walk us through how the school site council operates at your school?
The school site council is actually a really important deciding factor in the processes that we end up adopting as a school. So we bring our plans to the school site council, and then they vote on, after we present and after we have conversation, then they vote on whether we should move forward on whatever front it is that we're discussing. But we always want to make sure that before we bring something to them fully baked, we have captured the input of not just the families in the room, but the input of the students and families who have helped inform our plans along the way. So we're very careful to speak about that in the lead up to whatever decision will end up getting voted on at the end of that night. The school site council, it's important to know, and this is not just a Buena Vista Horace Mann thing, demands parity on its representation. So what that means is that there are a certain amount of members, a certain amount of staff who are classroom staff, classified staff, non-classroom certificated staff. We have community members represented on the actually formal voting body. And so this way, we're really making sure that every aspect of our community is represented when it comes down to making those decisions. And we try not to have majority rule votes. We really try to, first of all, allow for conversations in all the ways that Luz mentioned, because we know that those conversational ways really allow for rich sharing of ideas. So I'm thinking specifically of getting people to share in small groups or even in pairs. Not only does that force everyone out of their shell, but it also ensures that we are able to collect all of the ideas in the room. Those are what we call tier 1 strategies in the classroom. We can't just expect for, like Luz said, the leader to jump up and say, hey, this is what I want, right? If we're really looking for true inclusivity, we want to make sure that we hear from everybody. So what are the strategies that we can embed in all of our agendas, that all of the governance bodies, including the school site council, to make sure that we hear from everyone when we're talking about not just a decision that needs to be made, but a strategy that we want to employ, or how do we get more students to show up every day? You know, our truancy is really bad right now. How do we improve reading across grade levels? You know, what strategies can we make sure all parents are knowing that they should do at home? You know, should we bring back reading logs? You know, how can we partner with teachers who really didn't find that strategy very effective? So I think it's not just a decision-making body, it really is a place where we share best practices and really crowdsource some really good ideas.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And another structure at Buena Vista Horace Mann that we're really interested in is the student government class. So we wanted to start with you, Annabelle, and we know that the class is the student government structure at Buena Vista Horace Mann. And so as the sponsor for the class, could you share a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. As Claudia said, every stakeholder at BVHM plays a role at BVHM. And of course, our students' voice are really, really important. So because we're a school that also has elementary schools and middle schools, we really try to get our middle school students much more involved. So one of the things that we do is that we provide an opportunity for our middle school students to take an extra elective class, which is known as a seminar that I mentioned earlier. And some of the choices that students have, I said, again, is the student government class. The student government class has been offered for the last 3 years, every semester. And one of the goals, some of the goals and outcomes of the student government is for every student to have a much more genuine participation in the decision-making process of BVHM by providing input and leadership on the issues that are important to them. And in order to ensure that their voices are heard, this past year, they elected 2 middle school students representatives to be on the school site council. The students are not necessarily in the government class. Also, the student government class and the student representatives on the school site council, they helped the school draft a student survey about what middle school students had as priorities, what do they value, what do they want to see more of, and they really ran the survey and they made it their own. And because of the survey results, we organized a wellness day with their input and participation to meet their needs, especially knowing that they need wellness because they have been in distress over the pandemic. The other thing that's important is that being part of the student government, it exposes them to all these different worlds, industries, politics, and involves all students with different leadership styles. And through this process, they are learning about different styles of leadership, but most importantly, they are learning how to share decision-making process. More importantly, they're actually learning how the shared decision-making process are made, and they get to see the impacts in a real time. And then just lastly, the skills that the students are learning in the student government class are not only transferable to be successful in academics, but in life.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. And we know we have someone who is directly involved there. That's you, Katya. So I'm going to invite you to answer the question next. Katya, can you tell us about your experience in student government? What have you and your classmates been working on? And how has being part of student government changed the way you are involved in your school?
Well, thank you, Justin. Good evening. My name is Katia Aguillon Garcia. I am a 6th grader at Buena Vista Horace Mann School. I have been here since kinder. My experience with student government has been great. They have made me feel loved, and I can also be myself without the class. But most of all, I feel like I'm growing as a student in person. I feel confident to talk in front of crowds of people, and I also feel like the leadership has helped me with my own classes in the way that has helped me take initiative on work, and it has also made me become a better person in general. Being part of student government has allowed me to work on school dances to make the middle school students feel more special. We've also worked on Wellness Day to help the middle school students feel more independent and more like middle school students. In addition, we worked on Spirit Week that helped the middle school students to have a good time. It was fun to see some teachers participate in Spirit Week as well. The previous semester, student government group worked on getting the garden open safely, which was a huge accomplishment because our garden was closed for months because lead and arsenic was found in the soil, but now it's clean and safe. Lastly, it has changed my point of view. It has made me realize if you're more involved in the community, your voice is heard, but it has also made me realize how hard the staff works for the school and how hard they fight for it to be the school it is. It has made me more of a positive person, and I feel much more confident to speak up in settings that I might have not felt comfortable in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katya, for sharing your experience and all your wisdom. Just to remind folks, Katya is 6th grade, y'all. And so I'm going to turn it now to Nick. We focused a lot today on some of the formal structures and bodies within BVHM that support shared decision-making. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about how students, families, and the community who are not part of the formal structure are engaged in decision-making? And maybe share us an example of this.
Yeah, first off, Katya just summed up what makes this work possible. Community school work is organizing work. We are at BVHM in San Francisco in the Mission, we are suffering environmental racism in real life. We are dealing with facilities that are crumbling. We are dealing with lead and arsenic that's been allowed to be in our building and affect our children for decades and decades. And to do community school work is to lift up the needs. And like Katya said, our building is dangerous. Our garden was closed because they found lead and arsenic. They found lead and arsenic because they were looking at how to modernize our building. And I want to take it back to that because the lesson that we learned from launching the Stayover program was that if we bring people into the conversation and hear them and lift their voice, we can make dramatic changes and drastic changes. We had to organize, and our students had to organize, and our staff and families had to organize together, even to get funds to modernize this building that is doing harm to our students. So we had to push, and we had to show up at school board meetings, and Lou's organized, and the students organized, and the families organized, and we pushed, and we got loud, and we won. And all that did was set up the next organizing fight. And that was, how do we do this in a way that brings in our families? Don't expect to come to BVHM and use an old strategy that has been successful at marginalizing voices. The bond modernization program happens all over the country, it happens all over the state. The approach that they had did not line up with our values. So we were able to say, actually, before we make a plan for our building, you need to talk to Katya, and you need to talk to all of our students, and you need to talk to literally all of our families. And we really mean that. You need to talk to everybody before you bring a plan forward. And that shift in mindset and that ability and mandate to lift the voices up of students and families that have suffered through this decades of oppression, like that piece is the engine, and that all comes from the students. And I think Katya's example and Luz's description of how that works is key. And it, again, is also the mandate that we have when we're doing the community school work.
Thank you, Nick. I was starting to feel the hype when you're just like, all these teams, you just got to activate them and they're ready to go. And I just want to invite you, Claudia, do you want to add on to what Nick shared so far?
I love that we have a common understanding on our staff and in our parent and student community that really, if you're doing this work well, you are organizing, you are building a base, you are spreading first of all, you're understanding what message you want to send, and then you are out there sending that message. And whatever gains you make for your community is not for your community alone. You're setting the bar for everybody else, and you're extending a hand to other schools who are going through very similar things. And that's one thing that I really want to celebrate Luz and Nick for, with their activism around our modernization project, but also with our Stayover program that Nick told us a little bit about in the first place, but I don't think he actually told you what it is. The Stayover program means that at night, our gymnasium turns into a shelter for homeless families that are San Francisco Unified School District families. So it's the first of its kind. It happened here because we knew there was a need. Our families are in such close communication with us that they asked for that, and we responded by building alliances with our city government to make it happen. But we don't think that it should only happen at our site. This is a beautiful model. There are gymnasiums in every school, and so what we're trying to do is not only organize and advocate for the families on our campus, but for them, we're trying to do things that other schools can replicate in their own ways if it makes sense for them to do so. Whether that's a Stayover program, whether that's demanding better facilities, but we never see ourselves in competition for scarce resources. even though, that's kind of the way that the narrative is set up, right? We understand that real organizing just multiplies opportunities. There's not only, 10 available. And so that's something that I think that we are really coalesced around, and that, it's inspiring for me.
Thanks, Claudia. Definitely what's coming up for me is a call in the movement, right? Of like school are at the heart of communities. And I think you've like totally painted that for us. And we've talked a lot so far about the importance of shared decision-making today and the various structures at BVHM, and the things that you all have put in place to support shared decision-making. And I'd really like to focus now on the impact of all that work. Are there some examples of the impact of shared decision-making on the school's instructional program, supports for students and families, and the budget? And I'd actually like to turn this to you, Nick, if you can answer that.
Yeah, I think, just taking the Stay Over program example, I think what we heard is that just the program existing and knowing that if you're a student at BVHM or anywhere in SFUSD, that if you are homeless or don't have an option, you now do. So just bringing the existence of that program in has an impact, even if it's not utilized by a particular family. I think the other piece to name in the community schools context is we surfaced the need with data. We looked at it, we came up with a solution, and we delivered on a need that families expressed. And I think what that did is it deepened trust. It gave, I hope, the accountability that doesn't exist in a lot of schools and hadn't necessarily existed here, so that families see us as partners and see us as allies in this goal of educating our children and giving them this experience. And so I think that's sort of a dramatic example. This is a radical program. This is a new program. This is innovation, but it does show up in lots of other ways in our process that I think is good to highlight. An example came up a couple years back. We were really struggling with a couple of academic areas that kept coming up in the data. Our math instruction was really suffering. We're not seeing outcomes in math that we wanted. We were also just really struggling to meet the needs of our students with IEPs. And we were hearing from families, and we were hearing from teachers, and we were hearing from students that this was a priority. In particular, the ELAC was surfacing this and bringing it to the attention and saying, we don't understand the process. We don't know how to support students. This is an area where we're not feeling good. And so that rolled into our conversation at the end of the year around budget. We were in a situation where we had about enough funds for an additional position. And overwhelmingly, our teachers were focused on the math data and the outcomes, and our families had really highlighted the need for additional special ed services. We brought the family data to our teachers, and we said, we hear you, we see the data with math. This is what our families said. How do y'all feel about this? And we laid out the scenarios with a math option and an additional support for special ed students. And our teachers selected additional support for special ed students. So that decision-making was embedded in the formal structure, but it was also embedded in the trust that our teachers have in our families to drive that process as well. And they were able to step back, hear that, and then vote as a staff to approve and support the idea of adding special ed resources. We brought that back to our school site council, and we were able to sort of close that loop and say, we looked at data, we engaged our organized bodies, we got feedback, we shared it, we looked at our options, and we made a decision that was equitable, student-centered, and there was consensus in the community. So it can apply to these larger initiatives and innovation, but I think the function of it is really in all the decisions that we make as a school, and it has become part of our sort of natural operating sort of method.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. A lot of what you said is resonating. It's not showing on video, and I don't know if it's because I'm close to the work, but I started tearing up because of how beautiful that example. I was like, oh my gosh, you all did that. So thank you so much for offering that. And I just want to bring us to one final question before we actually open it up to Q&A. And this is a question on how is BVHM's approach to shared decision-making contributing to the culture and climate of the school? And this is something I want to throw out to all of you, and we're going to start with you, Katia. So how do you think your approach to shared decision-making is contributing to the culture and climate of your school?
Well, thank you again. The school met with the student government to ask us for input on a survey that they were going to do for middle school students. Nick Chandler, BVHM School Community Coordinator, and Nancy Hernandez from Jamestown After School Program asked us for input on the survey questions. They asked us what was missing and what we needed to add to the survey. We gave them our input, and the middle school survey reflected that input. This was important because we wanted to change the school climate to treat middle school students as middle school students. With our input, this is happening now. Throughout the participation of the student government and the 2 students representatives on the school site council, as students we are part of the school shared decision-making process. This makes a difference in our school climate because it makes it a lot more student-friendly. This allows our voices as students to be heard.
Thank you, Katya. Now I'm going to hand it over to you, Luz. And I'll repeat the question again. How does BVHM's approach to shared decision-making contribute to the culture and climate of the school? Oh, you can't hear, Luz? That was for you. Yeah. Oh, did you want me to say the question again?
Ok,
or-
perdón. No, está bien.
Oh, okay.
Muchas
Cool.
gracias. Pensé que iba a repetir la pregunta y estaba esperando, pero ok, está bien. Muchísimas gracias. Creo que estoy totalmente de acuerdo con todo nuestro equipo, ¿verdad? Sé que en la toma de decisiones en grupo es súper, súper importante. ¿Por qué? Porque las voces de todos son muy valiosas. Sabemos y entendemos y comprendemos la necesidad de cada estudiante, de cada familia, ¿verdad? Y de esa manera podemos tener un ambiente seguro, un ambiente sano, donde pues todos vamos a tener la misma equidad, ¿verdad? No podemos tener todo igual porque hay muchas necesidades en diferentes maneras, ¿verdad? Diferente cultura, diferente lenguaje. Entonces, todo esto que nosotros creamos, ¿verdad? Siempre es con el fin de tener y de mejorar y de aportar, ¿verdad? Lo mejor que podemos para nuestra escuela y nuestros estudiantes y familias. Entonces, yo estoy muy, muy orgullosa de participar y ser BBHM, un dragoncito. Yay. Entonces, eso es súper, súper. A mí me encanta la comunidad, me encanta el tener, ¿verdad? La oportunidad de alzar tu voz y que de que se te escuche, eso es muchísimo mejor, ¿verdad? El traer tus ideas y poder brindar lo mejor que podemos, eso es maravilloso. Así que pues yo estoy súper, súper contenta de ser BBHM. Escuela Buena Vista Horseman. Yeah. Gracias.
Hype us up, Luz. Yes. Annabelle, I want to invite you to add anything.
Absolutely. One of the things that this does is that it really levels the educational playing field for all students to be able to receive a quality and equitable education. And at the same time, it allows for voices who have not been heard, who have been left out, to be able to provide the guidance and the direction that their kids needs to have. And we want to make sure that our families have input, that they also have to be working with the school community to ensure that their kids do well in school. For too long, students of colors, Latino, poor kids have been left out. And it's time to change that paradigm and actually bring them all in and provide them with the strategies or provide them with the tools that they need. And part of it is making sure that we have a climate of shared decision making, that voices of all students, of families are heard. And we see that in different places where it's only the status quo. And we see with this model, it's changing the status quo.
Thanks, Annabelle. And I want to invite you to share, Nick.
Yeah, I think it keeps you on your toes. You are accountable and your decisions have an impact, and you feel that right away if you do something or move in a direction without everybody with you. And so I think it keeps us on track, it keeps us honest, and it gives us confidence to advocate beyond our school building. So if I'm going to be accountable to 600 kids and all of their families and our neighbors, then so are the folks that are supposed to be supporting me. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on my game and that I'm hearing the people I need to hear and making sure their voice is heard. And if it's not, then I'm motivated and I'm accountable to push that energy up. And then we start talking about policy change and system change and dismantling some of these practices that we know have been harmful for BIPOC students for decades. So it's a motivator. It's intense. It's real. I feel honored to even be in the middle of it. So I think if you're in education, you know the work it takes, you know the energy it demands. This approach to the work is energizing. This is the thing that feeds you. Hearing Katia talk about her experience, like right now, I know it's like 6:30. I'm working all day. Like I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? This is it. This is the transformation. This is what it feels like. And it attracts the same kind of people ready to do that work. And I think the relationships we have with the staff in this building are deeper because the folks here are aligned with that vision and they are accountable to each other. And I think it's a beautiful model, and I believe it's the future for us.
Thank you, Nick. I heard that we ride at dawn for community schools coming out of your sharing. And lastly, for you, Claudia, we have a slightly varied question. So we know in your role as a school principal, you always constantly have so many competing priorities. So how do you set a culture of relationships and make time for this work?
I wanted to answer the question about our approach, but I can talk about this too. First of all, let me just say that the two questions are very related. They really are, because if you're all about relationships, then you want to involve everyone. You want to hear from everyone. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable to take up space and center themselves in the conversation. And so we expect everyone to be involved in one way or the other. For our staff, you don't get a choice. You're going to be on some committee. You can choose the committee, but you're going to be on a committee. We basically send the same message to our families. We want you to be involved. You can tell us how, but we want you to be involved. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that many of our families, for example, they are not just involved at the school, they're involved at the district level. They are, members of not just the ELAC, but the DLAC, which is the district level ELAC. They're involved in the Special Education Community Advisory Council for our entire school district. They're going to conferences on, Spanish immersion, what our best practices are for students with special education in that kind of an environment. And really importantly, they have leadership roles in our community organizations that serve our families and our students. So community organizations that run workshops like Know Your Rights around immigration, Know Your Rights around eviction defense. And I do think there's a correlation between the kind of leadership that we've developed in our families in-house and then their ability to just take off in their own lives. And if we're seeing that in our families, we can hope that we see the same thing in our students. We want you to be active. We want you to center your needs and be involved, take care of each other. We need an inclusive community that cares about each other, that doesn't just passively let things happen to us. And so I think that that shows up in a variety of ways, but without the relationship, none of that would be possible. So you have to be warm. You have to show people that you care. You have to make time to have conversations about any and all things. You have to be able to throw your plans out the window and just listen sometimes. And so I think that not just me, but I think that all of our staff really model that here. And so that's what enables our approach.
Thank you, Claudia. And I know that the high expectations, the way that you model that is very much felt. So we're going to take a pause, y'all. Thank you all for the rich discussion so far. We're going to be moving into a 2-minute song break, aka dance break, to give you all an opportunity to put your questions in the chat for the panel if you haven't yet. We will be screening for them, as well as just get up and stretch and take a screen break. We will be starting back on the panel once the music stops. So let's take a break from here. All right, everyone, and we are back. Thank you, everyone, for all of the questions you've been submitting in the chat. We are continuing to track them. We will do our best to get to as many of them as possible with our panel for the rest of the time today. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Panelists, the request for you all is if we could just try and keep your answers to about 2 minutes each so that we can get through as many of the questions as possible. We will try and get 1 to 2 responses for each question, and I will name for you all who we're gonna task that question to. And I'm gonna start with the first question, and this is a pre-submitted question, and this is gonna go to you, Annabelle and Katya. What would you say are the best practices for shared leadership? And if you have any advice, what advice would you give to community schools that are just getting started? And this question comes from Denise Ramirez Mosqueda from Gateway College and Career Academy.
So Katya, do you want to answer or you want me to do it?
I can do any. Okay, well, I think it's more of like a communication problem. Like you have to communicate with that person and your group, and you have to like feel comfortable, and you guys just have to get to know each other. And it's really in like, you know, like how the school makes you feel, because I think Buena Vista makes you feel really comfortable and makes you feel like a family. So you're kind of known with everyone there, and it just makes you feel like you can communicate with them anytime. So it's just like really easy.
And I think just to add to that, one of the things that it's really important is that you have to be very intentional about what you're doing in terms of what you want to be able to build. And if you're working with students, students will know if you're being real or if you're not being real, and if you're being honest and if you're not being honest. But I think Katya, one of the things that she said, which is also really key, is building that relational trust. That is so important. And then at the end, also respecting the voices of those that have not been traditional in leadership positions. Many times we have in this country a sense of who should be a leader and who should not be. And within BVHM, that we don't have. We let those who want to take and lead us, and we work with them. And I think that's kind of like the way we do our things, whether it's student government, whether it's engaging parents to participate in the different structures of leadership that BVH has, or whether it's advocating for their kids.
Thank you, Annabelle and Katya. And the next question we have is a live question from today, and this one we're going to direct to you, Claudia. Are parents compensated for their participation? And if so, what funding sources are you using? And this is a question from Cecilia.
No, they're not compensated. We do provide dinner, childcare, but we don't compensate parents.
Thank you, Claudia. And the next question is another live question from Roxana Gonzalez. How do you respond to situations when not everyone agrees on a specific topic? How do you resolve the issue? And if we can direct this question to Nick and Luz.
¿Qué piensas, Luz?
Adelante, Nick.
So I think there's two different strategies. So one strategy around conflicts, if there's an issue that is between staff or between students or even families, we use the restorative practices model, and we have a structure for it, and we facilitate it, and we move through interpersonal and sort of individual isolated challenges using that model really successfully. And we do it with students, and we do it with staff, and we've even done it, with families. On the more systems level, and when it comes to shared leadership and accountability, I think it doesn't often happen. I think the stayover program and the launching of the shelter was really the spot where we saw that divide. And what we did was listen to every single question, try to respond with the experts and the folks that we knew that could respond, publish it so it was available to everybody in English and Spanish, and just really be transparent about concerns around strategies to respond to that, and let that transparency give us the insight we needed. And so in that example, when we went through that process, we launched a website that held every question that anybody asked in person or online. We sent a paper copy of that home, and we felt confident that we had heard all of the concerns, and we had gone through a process that let us move forward with majority and not like consensus. There were still folks that did not want this to happen, but we had used our structures to vet that, and we had the support from our leaders. So leaning on those structures when there's a conflict is huge. And having that structure and trust set up allowed us to do that. But I'd love to hear if Luz has thoughts.
Claro que sí. Entonces, definitivamente, pues no voy a decir que no suceden, ¿verdad? Porque obviamente siempre hay diferentes puntos de vista, ¿verdad? Donde tenemos que entender las dos partes, ¿no? ¿Verdad? El poder satisfacer, ¿verdad? La necesidad de cada uno y brindarles la oportunidad, el escucharlos, ¿verdad? Eso nos ayuda a que, ok, vamos a ver de qué manera lo podemos llevar mucho mejor, ¿no? Y crear un plan donde podemos llenar ambas, ¿verdad? Ambas situaciones, tanto para uno como para el otro, ¿verdad? No podemos no obtener uno y solamente tomar el otro, ¿no? O sea, siempre es juntarlo y llevar de la mejor manera para validar, ¿no? Validar lo que tu necesidad. Eso es muy, muy importante. La necesidad de todos, tanto estudiantes como maestros, como padres, es muy importante donde les brindamos, ¿verdad? Esa confianza. Y yo creo que es muy importante cuando tienes la confianza y tienes la oportunidad de brindar algo que le va a ayudar a todos. Eso yo creo que es muchísimo favorable para todos. Así que yo creo que podemos trabajar en eso fácilmente. Gracias.
Thank you, Lucindy. And next question is another live question from Tammy Lee. And this is for you, Claudia. Do you have a separate community school advisory council, or is the strategy incorporated into all the groups you've previously mentioned?
It's incorporated. So what's helpful is that our district is catching up with the notion of community schools as that becomes more of a solidified concept nationwide. And so we are receiving more guidance, more resources, and more organizational support than we have in the past. But up until now, it really has been up to us at a school site to just define ourselves and then reach out for resources and services that correspond to what we think it needs to be a community school. So it wouldn't make sense to have a separated out conversation about that, because it's just who we are.
Thanks, Claudia. I love that framing of like, this is just who our school is. And this question is another live question from Alma Cervantes and Benita Barrosa. And this is open to the group, so whoever wants to chime in. How do you cultivate relationship building in school governance? And do you have spaces where you can develop and strengthen these relationships?
Can I say something that Luz always makes sure that we do? Have a really good icebreaker. And then, I mean, just a check-in question that's going to loosen everybody up and really make them feel good about sharing. And then, have a raffle at the end of the event. Have food. Make sure that there's enough time for authentic, genuine conversation where people are actually talking about their children, or maybe even reflecting on their own childhood, what they had or didn't have. Right. So just infusing those more structured spaces with like the heart. So I've seen Luz do that really effectively in a bunch of different spaces.
Can I add one more thing, Claudia? Because I think what you said is also really important. But the other thing that I think it's really key, especially to cultivate that relational trust, is the follow through. If you say you're going to do something, follow through. Whether you say we're going to have this meeting, and in this meeting, we're going to have XYZ, make sure you do. And I think Luz touched upon, for example, in terms if there's no interpretation, don't have a meeting without interpretation, because then you are leaving someone else. So follow through is really key in everything, whether you're contacting families to let them know where their kids are at in terms of academically, and then what you say you're going to do to support that child, follow through. To me, follow through is really, really important.
Can I just say something for like the students? Is that I feel like the teachers or the staff is really well with like building relationships and making you feel comfortable. They make you laugh and they make you feel like that you're in like a safe place. So I think like the teachers, getting one-on-one time with you is really important because they can like build a relationship with you.
Thank you, Katya. Yes, I love that you threw that in there, like the importance of the role in relationships with the students, right? Well, and I think this may be our last Q&A question that we can get to for today, but this is going to Annabelle and Luz. How do you engage hard to reach, or then this question is from Angela Fung and Tiffany McDermott. How do you engage hard to reach parents to fully get participation from everyone? And does it help to adjust timing, like asking for help on the weekends, or are there other suggestions?
Luz. ¿Lo hago yo o lo haces tú?
Ok, déjame compartir poquito. Creo que es de suma importancia, ¿verdad? El invitar a nuestras familias, ¿verdad? Y crear esta comunidad. Como madre líder de ILAC, nuestro enfoque es, ¿verdad?, informar a nuestra comunidad, a nuestras familias de cuáles son las estrategias que pueden utilizar tanto en casita como dirigirlas a diferentes tipos de agencias que pueden apoyar para solventar la necesidad que tienen, ¿verdad? Es bien, bien importante el escucharlos, el que ellos se sientan cómodos en compartir contigo, ¿verdad? Eso te genera pues muchísima confortabilidad en el aspecto de, ok, tengo alguien que me va a apoyar, ¿verdad? Entonces tu necesidad es mi necesidad, ¿verdad? Porque de esta manera podemos crear un grupo donde podemos trabajar para minimizar esta necesidad que haya en nuestros estudiantes. Y definitivamente a mí me encanta ser padre líder, para poder traer servicios tal vez que nuestras familias no tienen acceso, ¿verdad? Pero aquí estoy yo, aquí está esta puertita que puede adentrar para apoyar y brindar este apoyo. Entonces yo creo que eso es lo primordial en mi persona y pues es lo que quería compartir. Gracias, Anabel.
That is a very powerful place to end this panel for today. And we are going to wrap up, y'all. Just want to give a really, really big thank you and lots of love to all of our panelists for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, all of your leadership expertise with us, and to everyone who participated and attended today, for all of your thoughtful questions and reflections in the chat. It looks like folks are dropping some food for thought that we should definitely take back into our school communities. But from here, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to introduce Rosalyn for a closing reflection.
Thank you, Justine. And again, thank you to the Buena Vista Horace Mann panel. Like Nick mentioned, it's 7 p.m., but I know for me, I already feel injected with a lot of energy and inspiration. So I'm sure all of you do as well. So as we close, we just want to have a reflection from Rosalyn Green-Charles. Rosalyn is the Regional Black Power Building Director for Building Healthy Communities, Monterey County, a support organization of the California Partnership. And to her role, she brings her perspective as a community partner, a parent, and an elected trustee in her community. Rosalyn.
Thank you, Jessica, for the introduction. And a big thank you to Buena Vista Horace Mann for sharing your story about how you are authentically engaging students, family, and community. We know this is a goal and hope for many of us, as our districts are now taking the opportunity to incorporate shared decision-making in their plans. So as we close, I want to leave you with some encouragement about the opportunity to continue engaging students, families, and the community in an ongoing partnership toward school transformation. As we heard in the panel, It all begins with the mindset shift that honors the expertise of parents and youth, a mindset where they are honored and respected. We have opportunities to value their expertise by inviting youth and families to support listening sessions in schools so that schools can better understand their strengths and needs and engage them in co-designing solutions. For an example, a listening session team, even if it's small, can be the beginning of a team that can support the school with important decisions such as staffing. Students and family can participate with educators in professional development to build shared understanding and skills. Students and families can also support schools and districts by leading professional development in areas where they have expertise. For an example, Monterey Peninsula Unified School District has invited and is covering the cost of registration for organizers, youth, and parent leaders from Building Healthy Communities to participate in the State Community School Summit on June 16th with them as partners. Honoring and compensating students and families for their time and expertise builds trust and strengthens teams. Other ways to engage students and families is to invest resources and time to build strong relationships with community partners. Oftentimes, community partners have deep-rooted relationships with students and families, know their strengths and needs, and can help schools and districts to build bridges with them. Thank you all for your time this evening, and I will hand it back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Rosalyn, for leaving us with that inspiration. So as we close, we just want to thank everybody again, our speakers, especially. We know you are running organizations and schools, and it truly was such a generous gift to have you here tonight, sharing your stories and your practices. And also a big thank you to all of you for being here and engaging with us in some shared learning. Please be on the lookout for our next learning session this fall. And in the meantime, we highly encourage you to take advantage of all of the multilingual resources we have available already from our past 3 learning sessions. So the California Partnership Shared Learning website page is currently being chatted. And lastly, before everybody heads out, we would love if you could take 3 minutes to share your thoughts about today's session, what was helpful, what you would like to learn about. So you can click on the survey that's going to be shared in the chat. And for those that complete it, you will be entered to win 2 $50 gift cards. We will leave the meeting open for 5 minutes as people complete the survey. And if you do have questions about the survey, you can chat them and we will address those via chat. Thank you and have a wonderful night.